Welcome, everyone. I am Enrique Acosta Gonzales, and I am joined by Ashkan Tashvir. And in this episode, we will be speaking about navigating control and autonomy in dealing with uncertainties. And Ashkan, I'm very interested in this particular topic as a person that went through similar things in their corporate life with dealing with control.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to us or watching us on YouTube. And thank you, Enrique. So let's jump into the topic right away and create the context. And um, so I often experience in working with different leaders and having discussions around leadership in various different domains, including academics settings. Um, and I think that there is this kind of a misconception overall. Now, I'm not saying that this misconception is everywhere, but it keeps coming up here and there that as if like you are a good of a leader if you are able to come up with this predictive plan, and then you have this great idea, and then you put it there, and then you get the people around you to understand it, and then they will go out and then they will do their parts, and they make it happen. It's a very straightforward um, way of looking at effectiveness of a leader, but it's a myth. Yeah, so it's not matching the reality as it unfolds. Now, if you set the expectation of leadership or a leader to be that, then if your so-called predictive plan doesn't get fulfilled, then you're going to be upset at yourself, or you're going to consider it as failure. Yeah. Now, this shows itself, for example, in the context of entrepreneurship. There are statistics that show over 94-95% of the startups, they fail in the first year or two. um, and there are other statistics that show, for example, let's say here in Australia, on every $1 billion R&D grant expenditures, basically the taxpayers' money being given under certain circumstances and conditions and criteria to entrepreneurs, so that they go out there and then build businesses, innovative businesses, and ultimately it can contribute to the growth of economy, increase uh, in job creation, et cetera, et cetera. But then every $1 billion of expenditure in that space, only two businesses are getting built. Now, there are countries that they show significantly higher numbers, but it's still, like for example, United States or the UK. But still, there's so much wastage there. Now, we're not going to go to the details of that conversation. The reason I brought that up is um, considering when you go one round in executing your predictive plan, and then you consider it as a failure. I think that's where the problem is. Yeah, that's telling us that in the back of their mind, there sits this meta content, piece of meta content, this piece of knowledge, the way that they're relating to it, as if I go there and I execute on a plan that I have and it doesn't work, therefore it's a failure. So who stopped the startup? You know, while in the reality, there are so many different factors that they can get in your way of executing your first initial plan. And the ones that they succeed are the ones that they, in a persistent manner, they keep going through this iterative process of executing, tracking, learning, refining and executing again, in a way that at the end your end product, or the business that you end up building, it's going to be far away from the initial idea that you had. Yeah. So now, so the thing is, like, if we relate to autonomy, um, in the in facing with all these different uncertainties, as if like I should want and therefore it should happen, and that's the metric for your effectiveness as a leader, then you're setting yourself up for massive disappointment. Yeah. So now, so I would like you to contribute in the creation of this context, Enrique, if you don't mind. Like, um, so how does this land to you? Like, what is your experience and your observation in when individuals, leaders, or organizations, they actually want to be control freak. They want to control every bits and pieces of the projects. Like, how's your experience and observation on that?
Yeah, well, the one and done methodology is very it lands in failure most often than not. So,
Mm,
to your point, you can have a great plan, but
mm,
also give yourself some latitude for iteration. I had a friend, CEO of mine, that used to say, "We innovate by iterating." Right? This is
yeah,
it's we always come back to the thing, and we always come back to the thing, and that's how we get ahead.
yeah,
So always have that in mind. Um, to the control freak leadership part, hey, I've had my experience with a control freak leader. It did not end well for either of us, but
yeah,
it is something that you have to look and ensure that if you're a
yeah,
leader, you can have great plans, you can have a way of going forward, but always consider that you're not the only mechanism in this whole machine, right? That we
yeah.
call enterprise, right? There are a lot of moving parts, and it's usually with people, and so you can't really control everything.
Yeah, so it reminded me of this video of a part of interview with the Steve Jobs where he talks about this disease. He says that there is this disease that many organizations end up dealing with, and he particularly talks about the time that he left Apple, and there was this individual, like, let's not, I forgot the name of this person, but then Steve Jobs says in the video, um, like, this person also got this disease, the disease of thinking that if you have great idea, you put this idea forward, and then the people in your team, they just go and then they do their parts, and then it's going to turn into this brilliant idea. But what he explains then later is like, no, actually the reality is like you have to put all these 5,000 different things together, and then it changes, as we said, like in an iterative way. You need to go through it, and you need to acknowledge that there are certain things that you can't change. You cannot make the plastic to behave in this particular way. You cannot, and you cannot have the factories to produce things exactly the way that you want. So there is a level of authenticity with regards to your the congruence of your conceptions of different constituent parts, and then ultimately you need to pull all these things together, what we call integrity in the being discourse, and ultimately it may work. Yeah. Now, the thing is, so going back to what we're discussing here in using that example, if there's going to be, according to Steve Jobs, metaphorically, the 5,000 different things that you need to be dealing with, now these 5,000 things, you don't know them. You're stepping into an unexplored territory. You're jumping into the unknown, to the new. Now, this is exactly where many um, people in roles of leadership, they may freak out. They may not be vulnerable enough, yeah, because see, they may want to pretend that as if they know everything, and sometimes people expect leaders to know everything, but the reality is you never know everything. At the end of the day, yeah, there are parts that you can validate, and you can look into, and you can make data driven decision, as they say, make decisions like that. But then there are parts that you don't have the luxury to actually gather information and data about around it. It can be very expensive sometimes to gather data. It can be time. consuming. And so there are times that the nature of whatever basically you are making a decision is not structured enough. You're dealing with unstructured problems, and therefore you need to jump into this unknown. Now, being with um, a tremendous amount of uncertainty is a must, is a big part of the reality. You cannot avoid it. Yeah. Now, therefore, the acknowledgement of that is the first bit. But then, okay, so how well you're going to respond to all this uncertainty? So this brings us to how a person is relating to the autonomy or responsibility. Yeah. So are you relating to yourself as a passive victim, as if like life is occurring to you, matters are being thrown your way, and therefore you are to be impacted? On the other side, you can be this control freak. You go, no, I have to do things my way, and it needs to go this way or that way, and I am the only one who sets the priority. And then you're going to keep getting frustrated because the reality is there's all these different forces. The market is going to change, people's expectations going to change. Other competitors are coming up with the innovative things that you didn't even have any clue. Economical situation can change, purchase power, etc., etc., and so many different things can happen that it can get in your way. Now, so that's the first one in this case, is like how we relate to autonomy. Yeah, not falling from this side of the cliff, being a passive victim, not falling from the other part of the cliff, side of the cliff, and be this control freak. But finding the balance, finding that healthy, stable um, part or place in it. Yeah, so having this healthy relationship with responsibility, so that you can influence whatever you can. Yeah, and you acknowledge and surrender to the things that it's not in your control. It goes way beyond your individualistic autonomy, or even like the autonomy that you may think you have from an organization perspective in the organization setting. To find this sweet spot is very, very important, and to discern it. Yeah, it requires your relationship with awareness, because you need to discern what sort of things are in your control, and there are possibilities there are opportunities there, and which type of things are beyond. Yeah, so that discernment is extremely important. Now, then it's also then your relationship, particularly with anxiety, not as like anxiety disorder, as a mood, as a state of mind, as this state of mind through which we disclose ourselves. Yeah, how you're going to deal with, how you're going to be with these uncertainties. Is it going to cause you collapse? Because if you have an unhealthy relationship with anxiety, you're going to collapse, you're going to be suspended. The expression of yourself through your decisions, through your behavior and actions, is going to be suppressed. On the other side, if you have a healthy relationship with anxiety, meaning that you can still go forward, step forward, despite the presence of anxiety generating situations or what ifs that you're going to go through, then you can amplify the expression and through your decisions and behavior. Ultimately, it gets even more tangible. Yeah, so it's not just about awareness, which is more abstract. It's not just about your authenticity or the congruence of your understanding of things, your relationship with responsibility, and we discussed anxiety. But now we can talk about a even more tangible, concrete quality, which is confidence. And by confidence, I don't mean self confidence. I don't mean self esteem. I mean how you relate to, or how you respond to situations that brings up doubt, hesitations. You're dealing with dilemmas. You have to make the decisions. How you're going to be with that. Yeah. So, what do you think, Enrique? Like, how to your experience in most cases?
The control freak is not uh, doesn't have a problem with you, and
Mhm.
most people need to understand that a control freak has a problem with themselves. And you
Mm,
just highlighted relationship, right? Healthy and unhealthy relationship with different aspects of what constitute a leader, an overall leader.
mm,
And when they feel like they are being approached with an area that they have an unhealthy relationship with, that's when they try to seize control, because it
mm,
is anxiety based, right? It's fear based. They
mm.
don't want to give way to an outcome that they did not anticipate. And
Yeah.
when we know many things change at an instant sometimes, and it is your ability, as you have just well said, to be with those areas when they come as a leader, so that you do not increase the level of frustration as a leader with your
Mm,
folks, that you don't increase anxiety on their end and fear on their end, and you become the person that brings solutions versus, you know, dissent
mm.
or disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's correct. And as you were talking, and just like I reminded that there's this conversation. Jean Paul Sartre, the existentialist French philosopher. Um, so he talks about freedom, you know, but he talks about freedom in a very particular way, because see, historically, we can say even trans historically, freedom has been glorified in a sense that like, it is something so great, something so uh, wanted, that we are even willing to shed blood for it, like we fought for freedom, whatever that meant to us. And but the moment that you look into it from this perspective that Jean Paul Sartre brought it up, he said that yeah, well, we are in a terrifying manner free. And then go, what? Like in terrifying manner free. What are that supposed to mean? Well, yeah, the thing is, the moment that you realize that you're free, you are free. And you are the one who should make decisions. You have that autonomy as well on top of that. It's like there's all these possibilities. There's so many possibilities, countless possibilities in most cases, um, that abundance of options, first of all, can cause paralysis, but also it's like then you are responsible for the decisions that you're making. So it's very terrifying because you need to constantly make decisions in life in areas that you're not expert of in. So you don't know anything about it. You cannot know everything about everything, even to the degree that you can make good enough decision. But you are given this right, you know by the virtue of just being there out in the world. You are to decide, and in the moment that you make the decision, see, you have the freedom of choice. But then that doesn't mean that you have freedom of consequences. So you can choose different pathways, but then they're going to lead you to certain outcome or consequences, and you need to own. So that's why, in part, I think that's my interpretation of when Sartre says we are in a terrifying manner free. So it's a kind of a burden at the same time. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not. I'm breaking that glory of freedom. Freedom is extremely important. At the same time, it brings certain responsibilities. It may become a burden, and also it can cause paralysis. Hence, your relationship with autonomy, your relationship with authenticity, your relationship particularly with anxiety when you deal with all these what ifs, and most importantly in the context of this conversation, your relationship with confidence, how you deal with dilemmas, how you deal with hesitations, doubts, then matters. And that's the thing. That's a kind of an encouragement for our audience, basically. If you're a leader, or if you are stepping into leadership, if you are aiming to become a leader, um, or if you're an experienced leader, like, you should know that you're not the only one who set the priorities. and you're not the only force that can influence whatever is going on. So therefore, the acknowledgement of this bigger than you, that with that higher purpose that we have in the being discourse, it's beyond you and beyond your time sometimes, so that we're not stuck in ourselves. Yeah, then it matters a lot, because you need to perform in a context. You're not performing in isolation. And sometimes this idea of independence and my individuality, my identity, or me, is going to um, mm, mm, lead us to forget that we are always within a context. Like Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, brilliantly, and I, clearly, I'm quite influenced by Martin Heidegger in big part of my work, philosophical work. The thing is, he brings up this conversation around Dasein, or being there. Now, not just being, not just existence, but being there. In German language, it says in der Welt sein, or being there out in the world. Now, this is a very important thing because it has a context. There, we are always within a context. You're never being out there, without in isolation. So, and then he talks about this other concept, mit sein in German, or being with. So it's inauthentic as a social being for me to think that I exist in isolation and I'm not being with others. Now, we are always being with other beings and with others. And so the acknowledgement of that from a leadership is, while it's very philosophical, but it's meaningful. It's extremely meaningful and has practicality. As a leader, it's not just you, it's not just you making the best decisions. You are a leader. You are being put in position um, that you have a degree of autonomy over people, the experts, specialists in fields that perhaps they know way more about that field than you. So, but the idea is like, why you don't deeply know all those fields, you need to be able to choose those people effectively, so that you can trust them. And and that's a very important thing, because see, all of these unknowns, for example, like, in order for that product to come out, as Steve Jobs was saying, you need to have all these different experts, all these different things, the decisions you need to make. In most part, you don't have any clue about those decisions, but then still, it's not just the experts that matter. Also, you, the leader, or the leadership, also matters, because the way that you can put all of these different economic resources, all of these is the aggregation of all of these different decisions that you are making after receiving consultation from the experts in the field. At the end of the day, the aggregation of these decisions are going to make it or break it, and you are responsible for it, you are accountable for it, and perhaps you have the most stake in it financially. So, in all different conceivable dimension, if you want to look at it, it's extremely important to build your confidence, to develop your confidence, so that you can be with and respond appropriately to the unknown.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking as you were talking, every leader has an opportunity to decide. I call
Mhm,
that a rock, right? And
mhm,
and in your decision, you're dropping this in a pond. At any
mhm,
given time, that wave that is the consequence of your decision will interact with other waves. It's impossible to
mhm,
live life in a silo, especially as a leader, and not anticipate that your decision will not interact with someone else's decision somewhere down the line, and even
mhm.
sometimes cancel out some
Yeah.
decisions that will come out, in the
Yes.
future. So you have to be conscious, but also as we're talking about autonomy and
Yeah.
these critical moments where you have to decide, um, uh, I would
Yeah.
say, you know go against the urge to control and allow your people and everyone to flow together. That is, I think, the ideal setting.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, and then there's a balance to it, and because see, in one side, like you want to, there's always this the paradoxes that you need to be dealing with as a human being, but particularly as a leader. See, for example, um, you want to be open, you want to stay open to feedback from all these different people, all these different experts, all these people in your team. At the same time, you don't want to turn to become um, a yes person, a people pleaser, because in part they, like the experts in the field, your teammates, very likely they know much more than you in depth. I mean, they have in-depth knowledge in niche areas. That's why you got them on board. um, but at the same time, perhaps none of them would see the totality of the thing from a global perspective. Yeah, from a leader perspective, like seeing multiple different perspectives, like you do. So, um, and the thing is, you need to balance it out. You need to discern when and where and from whom, in which circumstances, you should be open and receive and adopt their feedback, and then at which times you should say a strong no, and be assertive around it, and risk being offensive sometime, risk or being seen as offensive, risk being seen as this person who is arrogant or who doesn't have humility, or is not vulnerable enough, because at the end of the day you're going to be seen sometimes and then judged or assessed by individuals within your team and beyond, um, harshly. Yeah, inauthentically. But so these are the things that you need to risk being in a role of leadership. So similarly, when it comes to in um, hesitations, and like as we were talking about confidence, then there's always these dilemmas, like yeah, you're jumping into unknown. You can know certain things through studies, if you have the luxury, and then you find the necessity, yeah, so you go and then gather data and da, 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 and you make informed decision. But there are sometimes, as we said, that due to the nature of that thing, it's not possible. The problem you're dealing with is not structured enough so that even can be fully studied uh, formally, and it's still like you need to make decisions. You need to make decisions, and and here's the thing. So this is the last thing I would like to say in this episode, and then I pass it to you for final bits and pieces. The thing is, often the people that are so radically um, scientifically driven, yeah, so they just want for every decision they're making, especially leaders, they want proof, they want evidences, they want empirical data. That's really good to a degree, but mm, the reality is, like, you're going to be in positions that you still need to make swift, rapid decisions, or it's going to become too late. And you don't have luxury of going through all that empirical analysis, or and still you need to make a decision. So you're not a scholar sitting there, and you have plenty time in most part. I'm not saying all scholars, but in most part, like, you're not, your main job is not to expand the literature and the body of knowledge in a niche area, and you have plenty time and resources for it. You need to make decisions. You are in the field. And that's the thing, that yeah, you can leverage all of these studies and everything, but at the end of the day, there are times that you need to make decisions based off your gut feeling. You need to tap into, you need to take the leap of faith. And that's exactly where faith has its functionality. I mean, for most people, or for lots of people out there, in key decisions in their lives. So you can, like, when you're choosing your spouse and you're dealing with lots of doubts, you don't know, you have lots of what ifs. Should I really marry this person or not? Should I be in relationship with this person or not? It's a lifetime decision for many people. So can you go and then conduct like surveys and questionnaires, and then take like empirical evidences whether you can trust this person as your spouse or not, for the rest of your life? So therefore, there is a functionality that both in life and in organizations and leadership and you know, entrepreneurship. Uh, Faith as a way of knowing um, plays its role, and it's tightly linked to your relationship with confidence. Yeah. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I hope that our audience enjoyed the conversation. I would encourage them to put leave comments, especially on YouTube, so that like we know their views, and if there are topics that they would like us to cover, that would be really great. I'll pass it to you, Enrique. Any final word before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I was thinking analysis paralysis will will never be good in any situation, especially if you talk about personal. But
Mm,
in the realm of leadership, trust your team, trust your knowledge, trust your background. Don't allow fear to creep in and take over. Right? Fear will show up, but don't allow it to take over. Be decisive, but also always remember that those decisions do have consequences. Some long lasting, but be the leader that you were called to be.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Thank you very much, everyone.